Has there ever been a more important time in your lifetime to be a part of the right conversation? So many things are being talked about right now, and most of it is negative. And do you know what? Every organization is the sum of its conversations. If we're having good conversations, we'll have good organizations, whether that's our families, our churches, our businesses, our not-for-profits, even a city or a nation. We need to be talking about the right things, especially now. And we know what everyone's talking about: lockdowns and viruses and anxiety and fear and depression and suicide and joblessness. And it's piling on, all the negativity. But in the middle of all of these ideas that are being talked about, conversations that are being had around us, we are stopping for a day to have a conversation about hope. A conversation about hope. My name is Steve Osmond. I'm with National Hope Talks, and I'm here to welcome you to perhaps the most important day of this year so far, the year 2021, and the day we stopped and talked about hope. Is hope still an option? With all of the trouble, with all the negativity, with all of the fear, is hope still an option? Listen, the powerful thing about hope is this, is that it can exist without any evidence. There doesn't have to be a reason to hope. Because of this, I hope, or because of that, I hope. We're able to draw into our own human spirit and generate this powerful thing called hope. And hope can exist in the presence of lockdown and viruses and fear and shame and anxiety and depression, divorce and strife, all of the things. Hope remains a possibility in our lives, but we have to talk about it because every organization is the sum of its conversations. Listen, my favorite quote of 2020 was by Blaise Pascal, the 17th century French philosopher and mathematician. And he said this: somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. Did you hear that? Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. And that's the spirit of hope, that in spite of all that's happening around us, there's something incredible waiting to be known by us, by our families, by our loved ones, by our sports teams, by our charities, by our organizations. Something incredible is waiting to be known. And I want to welcome you to a day where we're going to discover something incredible. We're going to discover the power of hope, the power of a conversation. So we welcome you. Let's Talk Hope Canada, a nationwide conversation on mental health. And you're watching from the east, maybe you're watching from the west, the north, the south, on your laptop, on your computer, on your phone, wherever you may be. Maybe you're here for just an hour or so. Maybe you're here for the entire day. But let's join hands across this great country. Let's flip the conversation from negativity to positivity, and let's get this hope movement moving, because movement is medicine. So all of our health professionals that are tuning in, the CEOs, the presidents and vice presidents, the politicians, the city councilors, frontline workers, newcomers to Canada, rich and poor, no matter who you are welcome to be a part of this crucial conversation. So let's talk. Let's talk hope. We're going to get things started with one of my favorite humans on the planet. His name is Wakefield Brewster, and he's a spoken word artist.
Good day, greetings and salutations, warmest welcome. My name is Wakefield Brewster, aka the Lyrical Pitbull. I am about to perform a poem for you, and it is titled, I Can. After 2 decades of delivery on the MIC, unbelievably people still asking me, what can you do with poetry? That question used to make me angry. It used to get me hot. Now I tell them have a seat and ask them how much time they got. For you see, with poetry, I can. Duly danced down those same halls of learning where I once had the yearning to be a well-accomplished human with a 4.0, but my GPA was sadly way far below. I never got the knack of the educational flow. They made me sit still, so I stood still. I can confidently, comfortably cruise into classrooms where I was once coerced to create a captured, cornered mental state so I could clearly create a way to hate my own mind by my educators. They were eduhators. They formed a form to form my formative years, tainted with intolerance and a tidal wave of tears that sailed all of my dreams away from me. For they likened my self-image with one of stupidity. It was all that I heard and all that I could see. I can now be free. Where I was once imprisoned by a mental prism, my errant splayed thoughts were like hot-colored rocks, endless ammunition for the slings of possibility, but impossibly, all of my targets eluded me. For I was living in the kingdom of couldn't be me. I couldn't see the lock, so I didn't need the key. And when they finally let me go, they said, "You don't know poetry." I can versify being victimized into a valiant victory. Verify that when you vilify, you eventually gotta deal with me. The transformation was tremendous. I took the word stupid and I made it stupendous. I began to manhandle the land of language that languish in apathetic and anonymous anguish. I did decide to dissect and divide indefinitely, indubitably, what diction was doing to me. Stab a psyche with a simile. Sometimes slip left of center C so as to step off into a soliloquy, ail the English alphabet with an oral atrocity. I can wear the face of mental agility, dispel the myth of dental fragility, and proudly embrace my so-called disability. ADD, ADHD, OCD, PTSD. Now I've made an acronymphomaniac out of me, and never once before have I so ever loved ME. I can turn my inventive imagination into a physical infatuation, not like sugar, not the hard refined, not like sweetener, not the artificial kind. I don't need heroin because I'm a hero in my own mind. Spent some time with my mentality, and what I did find is I can learn. And poetry taught me when the truth is unfurled, I'm the only one man who can change my world, so I can do anything. What can I do with poetry? I ask you. Why don't you tell me?
Thank you, Wakefield. Doesn't he just know how to wake you up? Wakefield is an amazing spoken word artist who speaks about real things, and he is from Calgary, Alberta. Thank you so much for starting off our conference, Wakefield. My name is Connie Jacob. I'm the director of National Hope Movement, and we are so happy that you have joined us on this important day. Our very first speaker comes all the way from Nova Scotia, Halifax. Dave has been working with youth at risk and with mental health and addiction for many years. Dave, we are so excited to have you here and to hear your voice when it comes to mental health in the Maritimes.
I just don't live in Nova Scotia. I live on Cape Breton Island, which is the eastern part of our province. And I'm just a little bit biased because I think it's one of the most incredible parts of Canada. We're surrounded by beaches and the ocean and the mountains here, and some of the most friendly people in the world. And so when I think about what's it like to deal with some of the mental health issues here on the island, and just so you know, I primarily work with kids and youth, that Nova Scotia, and I would say especially Cape Breton, has never been able to deal adequately with their child poverty problem, and their numbers just keep getting worse here in the province. And in Cape Breton, it's definitely exaggerated because most of the communities that I work in range from having about 40 to 75% of the kids and really young families growing up below the poverty line. And so there's several issues here that I always feel are so tied together, and I don't think we can separate our mental health issues from our poverty issues, but also our addiction issues here in Cape Breton. And so a study that just came out a few years ago talked about how about over half of all the young adults in Cape Breton admit that they are problem drinkers. On the island right now, we give out about 400% more needles per capita than the mainland of Nova Scotia in our Safe Needle programs. We have two of the communities that have the highest per capita rates of opiate-related deaths, the highest amount of hospitalization because of alcohol. And it was in my own town about a decade and a half. A movie was made about addiction when it comes to the opiate crisis in Canada. It was filmed in my hometown of Glace Bay. And right now, the kids and youth that we're surrounded with right now, it's the first generation that has grown up that's been their normal. They've never known anything but that. And so I just think there's incredible stresses and anxiety when you have a whole generation of kids and youth who've grown up not knowing anything but dysfunction and not knowing anything other than addiction, not knowing anything but poverty. And then you throw those all together because a lot of kids are facing all of those at once. And so here in this end of the province, we have the highest amount of kids who self-harm. We have the highest amount of kids that are actually with a grandparent because their parents can't take care of them. And so those are the stresses. And then, so this year I can say all that, and then COVID hits. And you can throw out all those numbers I just said because that's not our reality anymore. And so every one of those things I feel is exaggerated right now. And so our kids are facing a whole new level. And then when I try to explain to people, how do I feel about our situation and what's happening right now, is that I just feel like the level of brokenness and the level of issues that we're dealing with so many kids and families is just exaggerated. It's never been at this level before. And so we just have so many people growing up not having, whether it be safe space, people to talk to, access to programs, being around mentors. And because whether it be addiction, poverty, or even some of the things I mentioned, you mix those all together and you just end up with a lot of kids and young people who are struggling. And so right now dealing with, I would say, anxiety, even us right now trying to keep all the kids that we're working with just going to school and having them in a place that they feel strong enough that they can go and be around people. And so, I mean, that's one of our biggest struggles right now. And so when I think about what is it that we're trying to do, and I would say we need to be that safe space for people. And we need to be that safe place that people can talk and let people have a voice. And we've just gone out of our way. And I just want to encourage everyone, when I think about what brings transformation, this, not that this solves everything, but when we just bless, and by giving of our time, our space, our food, whatever it is, and we just be a blessing to people and also show them incredible value, that they are just worth something. And I just believe as we just continue to bless and we continue to show everyone that they have extreme value, that brings incredible transformation.
Thank you so much, Dave. Your work is so important. Our next speaker is Annie. She is a youth from Nunavut. We found Annie on Instagram as she's been posting every day the reasons why youth and children in Nunavut should keep on living and not end their lives. She has a powerful voice. She's making a difference through social media. Welcome, Annie.
I post daily reasons to stay alive, Inuit specific reasons to stay alive on both Instagram and TikTok. And I am doing this keeping in mind of the Inuit youth that are currently being raised in the age of technology, Inuit youth like myself, and Inuit who have been disconnected from our culture as well. Inuit have one of the highest suicide rates in the world. And on top of that, even though we have one of the highest suicide rates in the world, we have a severe lack of mental health resources. And through my daily reasons of staying alive, on top of targeting Inuit youth, it's also spreading awareness to other parts of the world, about what's going on amongst Inuit. And so when I post these daily reasons, I'm looking at and appreciating the little things about the Inuit culture that might have been lost, or that are often forgotten about. And I post these daily reasons as well for myself, because I also suffer from my own mental health issues. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and depression back in 2017, and ever since then, I've been, on and off antidepressants targeting my mental illness. So what really actually helped me is digging back into my own roots of my culture, connecting with elders, going out on the land, doing my own research, reading, really educating myself, or trying to educate myself on what has been so lost in our culture, because there are so many beautiful things about our culture that are so close to being lost. And I'm sharing these daily reasons. I really hope that this that it will kind of spark hope in other Inuit youth, to find their daily reasons to stay alive. Because a lot of these reasons, even though they are pretty generic, they're really specific to myself. I speak these reasons from my heart, and I really believe that these are really amazing reasons to stay alive, because our Inuit culture is so beautiful, and it deserves to be shared, and it deserves to be loved and appreciated. And there's so many beautiful things about Inuit and how we survived up here, and I really hope that I can help the other youth, find the beauty in that.
Thank you so much, Annie. You are a remarkable young lady, and we believe in you. Our next speaker is Dr. Mary, all the way from Ontario, Canada. She is working extensively in mental health, and we value everyone, all of our mental health professionals. We value what you bring. Thank you, Dr. Mary, for joining us today.
Can I just start off by asking everyone who's watching this video to stop and take a deep breath? Wow, it's been some kind of season, hasn't it? We're all experiencing a wide variety of emotions during this COVID pandemic. There's nothing normal about this, and so we're having to navigate this together. I can certainly relate to experiencing emotions like anxiety and worry, anger, grief, and even a sense of feeling trapped. Emotions are normal in that we all experience them. It's part of being human, and they're actually signals that there's something that needs attending to in our lives. But what's normal now is there's really no normal. There's no rules or scripts that we can follow, because none of us have ever found ourselves in a situation like we're experiencing today. So I would strongly encourage you to practice these 3 strategies to help you cope with the stress of the pandemic. First of all, self-compassion is very important at this time. Giving ourselves space to recognize our stress and the ups and downs of our emotions. We need to lower our expectations and practice self-acceptance. And secondly, self-care is also critical. Stick to a routine if you can. Go to sleep and wake up at a reasonable time. Try to get outside at least once a day. Find some time to move around and do something fun or relaxing each day. And lastly, and most importantly, remember the importance of connection. Reach out to others at least once daily through texting or calls or video. Don't try to white knuckle this alone. I would say, though, that even as we give ourselves grace and acceptance for where we're at emotionally, we also need to watch that our emotions don't overwhelm us to the point where they become dysfunctional. So, for example, if we get paralyzed, or if we're no longer able to function with our normal life responsibilities at home or at work, or if we even feel suicidal, or we're unable to get out of bed for a period of time. We're now starting to see a rising number of mental health issues as we're facing unprecedented stress. which is having an impact on our emotional and mental and relational health. Suicide rates are unfortunately increasing as people are feeling overwhelmed with the impact of this pandemic. A recent poll found that 50% of Canadians reported worsening mental health since the pandemic began, with many feeling worried and anxious. We found the same results in a survey of Canadian workers, where 81% reported that the pandemic is negatively impacting their mental health. Substance abuse is also on the rise in Canada during the COVID-19. If this is you, please get help. Reach out to friends and family or doctor, and don't be afraid to get professional help with a licensed psychotherapist. And don't wait. Many of them are offering online sessions which can get you through this season until you can meet in person. Please hear me when I say this. Don't do this alone. Connection is the key to increasing our resiliency to handle stress. It gives us the inner strength to fight our dragons if we feel like we're facing our struggles and suffering together. It can be hard to feel like things can ever change when you're in the midst of your deep suffering, but there is hope.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mary. Our next speaker is Stephanie. Stephanie is from the Northwest Territories and speaks on behalf of the Inuit. I love the North, and I feel in Canada we need to hear from people from the North more. A little while ago, I got to go to Baker Lake, Nunavut, and got a chance to visit the people in the North and realize that I knew so little about them. Stephanie, thank you for being here. You matter. Your voice matters, and we are so thankful that you are speaking for your people for mental health today.
Barutit, greetings. I'm joining you from the Kwanghan Territory, and it is with deep gratitude to Songhees and Esquimalt nations for their kindness and their generosity. When you look at me, what do you see? Some folks have unconscious and conscious prejudgments about who I appear to be. Some see my tan skin, and no matter how hard I try, I am and will never be good enough. My younger self took this exclusion very personally. I was not educated on how to recognize, name, and work with bias, blind spots, and discrimination that exists. I thought there was something wrong with me. My mental health has significantly improved since I've learned the truth about our shared history, how to name and recognize individual systemic racism and discrimination. Learning terms like microaggression and tonal policing has helped me to recognize those comments that might seem like subtle insults and yet can be so harmful. Even though I have experienced exclusion, discrimination, and racist aggressions, I know that there is nothing wrong with me. I am enough. I draw inspiration, resilience, and hope from the many community bonds, especially the elders and youth. Elders in their kind and loving eyes smile as they tell me they see leadership in me. And this helps me to stand more securely. Despite these moments of empowerment that I have cultivated, I still have hard days and hard moments. The pandemic has been unifying in the sense that many of us have experienced loss. We have come together through our grief and been reminded to celebrate our lives and our strengths within the communities and homes. What has kept me grounded and moving forward has been my daily practice. Making time every morning for ceremony, grounding exercises, body movement and strengthening, learning and reclaiming ancestral practices, both Inuit and Celtic, reflective journaling, drawing, and making time for tears to come. An elder once told me that tears are medicine, and we shed them, we are releasing stress hormones. Another elder taught me to save those medicine tears in tissues and burn them. Making time to feel all the feelings, especially the uncomfortable ones. In times of grief, betrayal, and loss, any, all, or none of the feelings are an appropriate response. My tears connect me to our shared humanity. They are a signal to be curious about what my unmet needs are and to practice self-love, self-empathy, and self-care. This has been key to still having time and energy to contribute in small ways that I am able to community. And this further boosts my mental health and well-being and my sense of belonging. This is an interesting time to be alive, when our personal safety is uncertain at times. It makes it hard to come from a place of empathy for others. And yet now is a time when empathy and action are needed. This pandemic has disproportionately impacted Indigenous peoples. What gives me hope and inspires me is the resilience and the wisdom of Indigenous peoples and nations. This is not the first time we've gone through this. Reconciling Ways and Knowing just released a recorded dialogue session drawing on Indigenous knowledge in responding to COVID-19. I highly recommend watching the dialogue to understand BC Nation's experiences. Now is the time to be listening to the nations who have been and continue to be the stewards of these lands and waters for thousands of generations. They are the reason this is the land of plenty. Heal Mother Earth, and we will heal. Hajka, Kayanik, all my relations.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We see you. Our next speaker, many of you may know. Andrew is from Calgary, Alberta, but you may know him as a different character from Kim's Convenience. As many of you know, TV and media has been hit through COVID, just like so many of us. Andrew, thank you for being such a light in our TV and media world. We welcome you here to speak to this important topic.
I think I really started taking my mental health seriously and being aware of it about 10 years ago. I was hosting a stage at the Calgary Stampede, the greatest outdoor show on earth. And at this stage was like music and gymnastics and magic and pogo jumpers, and it was just a mishmash. And there were 10 shows a day. And so 10 times a day, I would go out and I would host the show. I'd introduce the acts, I'd work with the crowd, and there'd be 1,000 people every single show. And after the first day, I remember just like sitting in my dressing room, and we had these trailers behind the stage. It was an outdoor stage. I was just like numb. My hands were numb. I was like, what's going on? I've been doing improv and comedy since I was 16 years old. So it's in me. But I had never done 10 shows a day like this. And so I remember like the second day, I turned off all the lights and I sat just like quietly in a corner on a chair, on a single chair. And the stage manager comes in, he opens the door and he's like, hey, Andrew, your next show's in 5 minutes. He's like, what's going on? And I looked at him and I was like, I feel like I need to sit this way in between shows, because if I don't, I feel like my hands and head will explode. I go out there with all this energy, this hype, every single show, that in between I need to just like manage myself. And that's the first time I actually thought about, what do I need? What does my body need? What do I need mentally, physically, emotionally? And from that point forward, everything I do, every project I take on, every show, every movie I do, everything, I just think about those things. I think about what's my mind space and my head space before, during, and after. And it's been so helpful. It's been so helpful knowing my boundaries. So like one thing I've learned in my career is like, know your boundaries, know how you work, how you best work, how you are most like inspired and thriving. And knowing those things is so important, knowing your limits. Now that I know them, I know how I set myself up at all times. But then the next thing is is be willing to share them with others. So whenever I take on a project, or there is a stage manager, or there's like an assistant director on set, I always tell them, like, hey, this is kind of how I like to work. And I share those boundaries and I share those comforts with them. And what's really great, especially right now, I just finished filming the new season of Kim's Convenience. And what was so great was that in this time of COVID, where our mental health is so fragile and we have to be so careful about it, everyone on the set was so willing to share their boundaries, to know their comforts of how they work, follow the protocols. But this is so important. Everyone was willing to listen. And that's the thing. We have to know our boundaries and our comforts. We have to be willing to share them. But at the same time, we have to be willing to listen. Listening to how other people work. Oh, you need 5 or 10 more minutes to do this. Oh, this is your procedure. Like, just knowing that with people made the set so much more positive and happy and supportive and loving. And if there were days where something wasn't going well, we were so willing to support that person, that crew, that team, the whole entire unit on getting that done. And I'm proud to say we finished the season with no issues, no COVID cases. And I'm so proud that everyone brought their energy and kindness and thoughtfulness and willingness to support one another. So remember this, know your boundaries, know how you work. For me, it was sitting in the corner by myself. For you, it might be listening to music. It might be having a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. It might be laying down. It might be doing yoga every hour or two. It's something. Know those boundaries. Know how you best work. Number 2, be willing to share them with others. We can't assume the other people know how we work. We got to be willing to politely and clearly communicate our boundaries with others. And then finally, listening. We got to listen. We got to let the other people speak. We got to hear them out. We got to let them finish speaking. And we have to internalize them. I know for some people, we hear it and it's right away. It's like, yeah. You want to solve the problem. It's not about solving the problem. It's just about listening and being aware. So I hope that helps. Mental health is so important to me. Good mental health is so important to me. And right now, more than ever, it's so important to take care of yourself and to take care of others. So thank you for listening. Thank you for participating in this amazing conference. Thank you for participating in this day. And I know we've said, this is such an important day, but let's make this an important year. More than ever, our community needs us. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for participating. Thank you for listening. Enjoy your day. Peace.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for being here with us today. Our next speaker is Akeem. Akeem is an athlete, and athletes have had their own challenges with mental health through COVID. Akeem is not only an athlete who's gone to the Olympics and won bronze, but he's also an author and a speaker and a resilience expert. Welcome, Akeem.
Good afternoon. Look, 2020 has been an interesting year to say the least. And even though we are in a new year, we are hoping that some of those same problems don't follow us into our future. But let's be honest, we all struggle mentally in many different ways. Being an athlete for so many years and now stepping out of the sport, I still keep in touch and mentor a lot of young athletes. You see, last year in 2020 was supposed to be an Olympic year. So many people have been training 4 years before in 2016 to get ready for 2020 and to hopefully make that dream a reality. But many athletes did not have the ability to compete. Didn't really even have the ability to train properly. What most people see on TV at the Olympic Games or in a basketball championships or football field, baseball field, wherever the sport is, all they see is the final product, but they don't see the battles that an athlete faces. When you're picking up yourself when you've fallen, when you haven't had a good training session, but you got to show up to compete. When the world is telling you that you're not good enough, that you stunk up the place in your last competition. When they think that you aren't human too, because of the courage that you put on to face thousands of people, not to mention your competitors, all working towards one common goal, and that's to be the best in their field. 2020 has really showed us of what we're made of. So many things that we thought we couldn't overcome, we found a way to do it. No, I'm not saying athletes don't have their moments where they do feel weak, because a lot of them, they do feel weak. They feel like nobody's listening to them. They feel like everybody has said that they're Iron Man or Iron Woman and that they can't show any weakness. But as an athlete, it doesn't mean you don't feel those emotions, that you don't feel what's happening inside, but you're just so used to covering it up because you have to put on a strong performance. Everybody goes through pain. Everybody goes through trials and tribulations. Everybody goes through setbacks. Everybody goes through delays. And at this conference, it's important more than ever that we know that as an athlete, a former athlete myself, that we feel weak too. And even when we are strong, we get tired of being strong all the time. Athletes don't always get the in-depth look into what is going on inside of their hearts and their minds, because on the external surface, they're just rewired and so focused on performing well. Because if they don't perform well, they'll get ridiculed. And as you're watching this today from an athlete perspective and you're looking in, be a little bit more encouraging to what you see on TV. All the hard work that they physically put into reaching a certain point and getting to a certain pinnacle, there's a lot of mental battles that they aren't talking about. There's a lot of things that they have to deal with in order to be that strong person that you see on TV. Matter of fact, I'm reminded of 2016 when I was getting ready to go to the Olympic finals. And I was so excited to compete, but I also was facing another dilemma. You see, I was getting ready to compete at the highest pinnacle of a track and field athlete's career. But I was taking a call from a friend who was passing away from cancer. He was on the verge of losing his life. And as I took that call, he said something to me that always stuck with me. He said, "Hey, it's your time. Show up today." And it was at that moment that I had to put my emotion aside. I had to shed my tears in those moments and pick myself up only to compete and win a bronze medal 7 hours later. But nobody saw that. And I just want to remind you today that the next time that you see an athlete who maybe, they didn't perform as well, maybe you got them in your fantasy football team or your fantasy basketball team, just remember and keep in mind that they are facing a lot of things that they aren't talking about. But you would be surprised what a simple hello, a simple how you're doing, and a simple I'm rooting for you can truly make a big change and a big impact in making them feel like they're not alone.
Thank you so much for being here, Akeem. Our next speaker is Sandra. Sandra is a powerhouse, a woman of color who has built a business from the ground up. She is the very definition of resilience, and she's here today to share about what it looks like to be resilient as a woman of color, but also in business. Welcome, Sandra.
Last year, 2 days after Father's Day, my father died. It was sudden. It was unexpected. I was devastated. I found myself looking, yearning, searching for words that would comfort me. And what came to me were words that were spoken by a mentor of mine. He said to me, "Let nothing steal your peace." Those were words based on something that had been said by the Dalai Lama. I couldn't understand it at that time. Why would he say that? Were those the only words of comfort that he could offer? But they were words that came to me often, and words that eventually proved to be words that gave me peace. I found myself in recent times going back to those words. I found myself having to call on all of my powers of resilience in recent time. And what those words said to me at that time when I was in the depths of despair are the same thing that they say to me now as we are going through one of the most devastating losses, devastating situations that we've ever had to face as humanity. What it said to me was that regardless of the circumstance, I always have the power to choose my thoughts. And so those are words that I would like to share with you as we navigate these unknown territories, as we navigate loss beyond anything we could have imagined. I want to remind you that let nothing steal your peace. Know that you may not have a choice when it comes to the circumstances, but you absolutely always have a choice when it comes to how you choose to respond to those circumstances, how you choose to think about those circumstances. I know that we've all been through so much, but if there's one thing that I know for sure, it is this, that no matter how dark the day, no matter how bleak everything seems, there is always something to be grateful for. And now more than ever, I urge you to turn to something that we seem to lose as we grow up, and that is the power of celebration. Celebrating ourselves and celebrating the little victories as we go through each day. All too often, once we're grown-ups, we only save our celebrations for the big moments, the big things, the big achievements. But I'd say that especially in the time that we're in now, it is more important than ever to look for the little things to celebrate, to find the little milestones, whether it just be that today I got out of bed, whether it just be that today I managed to get through the day without snapping at my children, whether it be that now, more than ever, I know that I need help, and being able to reach out for help and celebrating the fact that we recognize that. We have all been through so much. And what I would want to urge you and to remind you is of these skills that we all know, but sometimes lose sight of when we're in the midst of crisis. That we have the power to choose our thoughts. We always have that power. That we always have the power to find something, no matter how small, to be grateful for in each day. And that we always should be looking for things to celebrate, no matter how small they seem.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for being here with us today. Our next speaker advocates on behalf of children in Canada. Sarah is the CEO and founder of Children's First Canada, advocating for children's safety. Did you know that in Canada, we are only ranked number 25 in the world for child safety? Sarah is advocating on behalf of families and children to Parliament to make sure that that number 25 can become top 10 in the world. Her work is substantial and needed right now so that our children not only can physically thrive, but mentally and emotionally. Welcome, Sarah.
Today on Bell Let's Talk Day, let's talk about the mental health of kids in Canada. Many Canadians believe this is one of the best places in the world to raise a child, but that simply isn't true. The state of childhood has been on the decline in Canada for over a decade. You may be surprised to learn that Canada currently ranks 30th out of 38 affluent nations for the well-being of kids according to UNICEF. That's a significant drop from 10th place a decade ago. As a country, we've been going in the wrong direction for far too long. And the stats are alarming. 1/3 of kids in Canada do not enjoy a safe and healthy childhood. 1 in 3 Canadians reports experiencing abuse before the age of 15. 1 in 5 kids lives in poverty, and shockingly, suicide is now the leading cause of death for children ages 10 to 14. Adverse childhood experiences like poverty and abuse have a significant impact on children's mental health during their childhood and throughout their lifetime. They are more likely to experience adverse child health outcomes during their lifespan, including a greater likelihood to experience addictions, heart disease, depression, self-harm, and suicide. Childhood is threatened for millions of kids from all walks of life in Canada, but the odds are particularly stark for Black, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children and other racialized kids in Canada. Systemic racism impacts the mental health of kids in many ways. They are more likely to experience poverty and abuse, more likely to be overrepresented in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems, more likely to be suspended or expelled from school. Children face too many challenges. And while we've come a long way in fighting the stigma of mental health in Canada, many challenges remain, particularly for kids from racialized families. When kids finally have the courage to reach out and ask for help, they're often put on lengthy wait lists, often waiting upwards of 1 to 2 years to access professional mental health resources. Many families resort to privatized care, but the cost for continued support is prohibitive for far too many kids, and they fall through the cracks. Over the past decade, there's been a 66% increase in children seeking mental health support in emergency rooms, signaling that they're not accessing the care that they need within their community and from their long-term healthcare providers. While these stats that I've shared are jarring, these are all pre-pandemic stats, and we know that the pandemic has made a bad situation much worse. Kids and their families are now facing unprecedented challenges during the economic crisis and the ongoing restrictions. Health services and surgeries for kids have been cancelled or postponed, and access to social services has been limited, including delaying kids' access to mental health services. Daycare and school closures have impacted not only kids' education, but it's also cut them off from nutritional programs and safeguards against abuse. While much of the emergency response is focused on protecting the elderly from infection, kids have disproportionately been affected by the lockdown. Children First Canada's latest Raising Canada report highlighted that all of the top 10 threats to childhood show signs that they may be increasing or in danger of increasing because of the effects of COVID-19. An important new finding is that young people ages 12 to 17 often rate their mental health less positively than their parents do. When we compare their responses, youth show a different perspective than their parents about half of the time. When a difference occurs, 65% of youth rated their own mental health less positively than their parents did. These results suggest that some parents may not be aware of the mental health struggles experienced by their children, and it points to the need for more open and honest conversations between parents and their kids in order to identify the problems and ensure that kids have support. Crowdsourced data that was collected early on during the pandemic also suggested the perceived mental health of Canadian youth has declined during the pandemic, with 57% of participants aged 15 to 17 reporting that their mental health was somewhat worse or much worse than it was prior to physical distancing measures. There are other indications that children's mental health has been worsening during the pandemic. For instance, Kids Help Phone has experienced a significant increase in demand for support through their phone and text services since the pandemic began. And women with children under the age of 18 have shown significantly increased levels of depression and anxiety since the start of the pandemic, which could have a negative impact on children's mental health and well-being. These stats that I've shared with you are all jarring and quite depressing, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. But there are lots of reasons to feel hopeful. So I want to leave you with 3 simple steps that you can take to invest in the mental health of kids that you love and all kids in Canada. First, take time to check in with the kids that you know and love. Open the door to honest conversations and to have candid talks about their mental health. Let them know that there's nothing that they can tell you that would stop you from loving them, and let them know that they can always come to you for help. Second, speak up for kids within your community. Advocate with your local school board and your MLA and urge them to invest in mental health services for kids in their schools and in your community. And third, speak up for all kids in Canada. You can sign the Raising Canada call to action and urge our Prime Minister and other members of government to take action now to improve the lives of all kids in Canada. Every child in Canada has the right to survive and thrive, and you can be a part of the solution by keeping their hope alive. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your work here in Canada. Our next speaker is Dr. Dom from Quebec. He speaks to the faith and spirituality sector of our nation. What has it been like? What are faith communities doing right now to help mental health in Canada? Welcome, Dr. Dom.
I'm really grateful for a chance to just share just a few minutes with you about the kind of things that I'm learning and the kinds of things that make me hopeful that we can still continue to learn and continue to walk with people who find themselves in dark situations where they feel that they're alone. You know, many of you know this, that we've just come out of the Christmas season and the beginning of a new year. We're excited about the opportunity of, just being part of a conversation that's happening around our society with different organizations about this issue of mental health. You think of Bell Let's Talk event and some other organizations that are really concerned about what it means that some people just don't feel that it's safe enough to share about their own struggles with mental illness. We're not experts. We haven't solved everything on this. We don't have all the answers, but we are learning to create some new conversation places for people. Just a few years ago, we hosted a small local conference, and we brought in a speaker who herself had struggled with years of mental illness. Her name is Amy Simpson, and she wrote a wonderful book, which is a great resource that I want to encourage you to think about reading as a staff and as a team, called Troubled Minds, as it relates to people starting to find the words and the courage to talk about mental illness. Mental illness in their home, maybe mental illness in a workplace, with our children. This is a really huge topic. And like I said earlier, we're not pros or we don't have all the answers for this, but we are learning that one of the best things that we can do is just to create a safe place to listen. I want to tell you that one of the joys of my life has been that as I'm learning to listen to people and as I felt inadequate sometimes to help them in those places of real difficulty or those places that felt very, very dark, those moments of depression, just listening was really teaching me that presence and being there with people is part of the way the solution is discovered. That oftentimes we don't have to have all the answers if we can just be silent and be people who are understanding as best as we can be for people who are going through moments that feel dark and lonely and challenging. And so for you, maybe this is a season you're going to be given opportunities to do that one-on-one with somebody, to open up your heart or your home to a conversation with somebody who feels like they're misunderstood. You might be able to begin a conversation where you're learning together, you're reading something together, you're inviting a person who maybe has struggled with mental health or a mental illness to just share their story in a venue that's more public, and to encourage them to do that. And to remind them that no matter what they share, they're not going to be judged, they're not going to be shamed, they're not going to be seen as weird, but they're actually going to be listened to, and they're going to be encouraged to grow and to trust others who can come alongside of them in those difficult moments. You know, one of the things that Amy Simpson taught me as I read her book and as we had her at that conference I talked about, was she gave this powerful image of how weird it is sometimes in our culture to see somebody who's wearing a cast on their arm or on their leg, and to quickly understand that a part of their body needs to be healed or a part of their body needs to recover from an injury, and how there's no stigma related to that kind of injury. But then when somebody's brain maybe has a part of their brain that triggers certain chemicals or gives them a sense of feeling inadequate or anxious, which is often related to mental illness in our minds and in our emotions, we somehow have this wave of stigmas that emerge. And so it's really helped me to think about and to encourage people to think through the fact that sometimes people just have like a part of their minds or a part of their brains that is recovering from something that's making them hard to explore deep feelings, get honest about mental illness, and to know that they're not going to be judged or shamed for that. As we go through this COVID period and as we try to reconnect with others, no matter where you're watching from, you would be open to being honest about your own struggles and your own frailties that might help someone have the courage to speak about their struggles, and that you would look for opportunities to listen better.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Dom. Your heart is wonderful. Our next speaker is Abe Brown. He is an entrepreneur. He is a business owner in Calgary, Alberta. And he speaks to how mental health has been substantially impacted with entrepreneurs and business owners as we've gone through quarantine and COVID. Abe Brown is also one of our main sponsors of this event. Thank you to Wellness Innovate for sponsoring this event today so that we could stand together as a nation. Welcome, Abe.
The conversation around mental health has always been a critical part of my journey. I think this was not something that I sort of intended, and it's certainly not something that came about by design, but it was something that happened really as a result of, the family that I grew up in and experiencing significant mental health issues in my own family, and seeing the impact upon that in terms of imprisonment, in terms of lack of treatment, in terms of addiction, and in terms of death, all within my own family. And as I grew, I began to see even in my own life the impact of mental health and how it was so important that I paid attention to my mental health, that I got support when I needed it, and that I made sure that I allowed that conversation to be a regular part of my journey each and every day. And now professionally, in the work that Connie Jacob and I do at Wellness Innovate, mental health is a big part of what we do every single day because our entire focus is workplace mental health. And one of the things a lot of people don't know is that even before COVID-19, there was an emerging mental health crisis amongst leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives. And I got news for you. Not news to you, I can promise you, that COVID-19 has only made all of this worse, right? Whereby before COVID-19, people were struggling with sort of normal stress and normal work-life balance and normal issues around cash flow. COVID-19 has absolutely exacerbated all of that. And it has dropped one of the biggest mental health bombs into the equation, and that's this massive bomb of uncertainty, because no one knows what the future holds, and no one knows exactly how everything is going to play out. And so that has really impacted our mental health, and it's certainly increased our levels of stress right across this country. The good news is that in this conversation around mental health, I think collectively we have learned a few things. The first thing I think we've learned is that things can get better, right? We're talking about mental health. We can actually impact our own mental health by taking positive and proactive steps each and every day. So the great news is that things can get better no matter what you're facing today, even no matter how you're feeling. Our mental health can improve every single day. I think the second thing we've learned is that things don't happen. Our mental health doesn't get better in silos, right? Mental health always improves when we're in community and we're in connection with safe and supportive relationships. The third thing we've learned is that things get better as we talk. And so my hope for each and every one of you is that we'll all talk together at the Bell Let's Talk Day National Conference on January the 28th, 2021. That's at the Bell Let's Talk Day National Conference on January 28th in 2021, because not only are we going to be talking about our own mental health, we're going to be talking about how it is we can collectively work more to improve the mental health of individuals, of families, of relationships, and of course of organizations, businesses, nonprofits, charities, right across this country, because our mental health truly matters. Thanks so much for tuning into this video today.
Hi, I'm Alnur. I love having chai. I love having chai conversations where I get to learn about you and you get to learn about me, and I get to share my story. I get to share my voice on mental health. Let's talk. Let's talk hope. Thank you so much for inviting me for the Let's Talk Hope conference, where we get to hear stories and voices on mental health and the work that is being done in the community. I'd like to share with you what's being done in my community, and particularly with the Aga Khan Health Board. The Aga Khan Health Board partnered with CMHA-BC in 2010. At that time, 3 facilitators were trained to deliver a resiliency-based model. Across Vancouver, these sessions went really well, and they decided to add more facilitators. And in 2014, I was approached and said, Alnur, would you like to deliver mental health as part of your repertoire? I said, yes, indeed. So I flew off to BC and took the training. Since then, I'll be delivering 2 cycles per year. And then these sessions are face-to-face, and we know what happened in 2020. We could not deliver these sessions face-to-face. So we put our heads together and created a 4-part webinar series for the Canadian population. These sessions were well received, and individuals across the United States and all across the world wanted these. We said, certainly. CMHA then came back and said they are ready with the virtual pilot, and we completed that 2 months ago to a resounding success. So what are these sessions? They are 12 hours on cognitive behavior therapy, 8 weeks in length, and the sessions are around chunking, which is breaking down into smaller bite-sized pieces. We have negative scripting, problem solving, and reframing, as well as 10 things you can do to make yourself happier. However, when I started delivering these, I was asked about faith and mental illness. And I said, well, that was very hard because they said, well, you can cure this, but with prayer. However, when I started sharing my personal story of my struggles with depression, with anxiety, PTSD, I would get some of the male participants would be calling me after the session and saying, that was just like me. I shared how imperfectly perfect I was. And what that did, it made it easy for them to open up after the 4th and 5th session. When I go back and look at it, how do I define success? Because I've struggled. I used to be over 380 pounds in 2010. I've lost over 220 pounds. Yet, when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of stressors that happened. And I got fear. I felt a lot of shame. And the imposter syndrome kicked in. And I reached out to my manager and he said, oh, Lord, that's okay. And it's because there was acceptance, there is the community involvement, and it is with that. And what my younger son told me, Papa, failure means you grow. How beautiful is that? I used to carry mountains with the stress. Now I hike mountains one micro step at a time. One micro step. This is the process of healing. That and the community and conversations. So I urge you to have a virtual water cooler chat. Reach out to members in your community, in the faith organizations. Reach out to your family, talk, ask them what's going on. Ask, are you okay? Because it is with that we can make a change. And when we open up, when we have honest hope for age conversations, when we have open arms, open minds, when we are persistent, P, and when we engage with others, E, hope, with the community, that is when we will make a change. Thank you so much. Let's have conversations. I'm Eleanor. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Craig from the Calgary Dream Center, working with men recovering from addictions. The Dream Center has such an interesting story of how they responded as an organization and a nonprofit through COVID. I cannot wait for you to hear their story.
Hello, my name's Craig Hill, and I'm speaking to you today from an organization called the Calgary Dream Center. Over 20 years ago, a dream was birthed in the heart of a group of people that saw a need in Calgary and realized we can meet that need. We wanted to reach out to the vulnerable population of our city, those who were desiring to come out of the cycles of addiction and homelessness and enter into a life of recovery and sobriety and have their dignity restored and discover destiny once again and begin to dream. And that was over 20 years ago. Well, we started with 3 staff members and 12 clients. And over the years, we've now had well in excess of 8,000 people come through. And we have programs for women and families and men. And we've been able to make a huge impact, but it started really, really small. And we've sensed there's been so much opportunity. There's such a need for this type of work. And as momentum is building for the organization, well, out of nowhere, obviously, COVID hits. And COVID was such a hard stop for all of us and everything we were doing. And we had to come to terms with what now? And as a frontline type of organization dealing with these cycles and these vulnerable populations, we really had to come to terms with what this means and what we can do. Well, we entered into an extraordinary season, and I want to share briefly with you what happened. I was communicating on a Sunday a message, and I received a text afterwards from a little girl. Her mom sent it, and the little girl had a button on, and the button said, "It's going to be okay. She gets it." Now, I did not share that, but the essence was, we're going to get through this. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to get through this. And she wore this button, and with that, an idea was born. And we purchased hundreds of buttons, and the "It's going to be okay" buttons turned into "I choose hope" buttons. And before long, we had thousands upon thousands upon thousands. We had large signs like this that were posted throughout our city. Yard signs were put up. Families were taking, little ones were taking rocks and painting them yellow and putting "I choose hope," that message, and dotting it throughout the communities. The road signs appeared, yard signs appeared, the radio stations got on board, newspapers got on board, digital media marketing companies got on board, because we invited them to join with us in releasing a message of hope. And it caught on, and it caught on quickly, because what was happening was, in the midst of despair, in the midst of such deep discouragement, and really a spirit of fear that was moving everywhere among us, how are we going to impact? How do we make a difference? Well, we decided we wanted to release hope, wanted to release the message of hope, and we also wanted to see what we could do to raise funds. So with both of those goals in mind, we released a campaign, or started a campaign called "I Choose Hope." We added a domain name, yyc.ca, to that. Generous donors stepped up and agreed to meet every donation up to $100,000. So before long, we had raised $215,000 for frontline workers and the work of the Calgary Dream Center. But equally, if not more importantly, is Calgary was blanketed with a message of hope. Here's what I want to share with all of us today, that it was about making a choice, and every one of us has the opportunity to choose the report that we're going to follow, the report that's going to define us, the report that's going to influence how we go about relating one to another. And one of the core messages and learnings of the Calgary Dream Center throughout our years has been this: the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but it's actually connection. And we've learned that in the area of homelessness and addiction. And in this hour of our society, when it seems like being together, that whole idea or the opportunities have been severed and cut off, it's just not the case. Together, as we make commitments to be ambassadors of hope and bring people together around whatever is good, whatever is pure, whatever's noble, if there's anything excellent, if there's anything worth talking about, if we rally around these things, the resilience that's within all of us, the spirit within all of us begins to shed a bright light in a dark hour. We've not been given a spirit of fear, but together we have love, we have power, we have a sound mind, and we can make a difference as we invite others to partner with us and choose hope.
Thank you so much, Craig. And I also want to thank the Calgary Dream Center for being one of our main sponsors of this event. Because of you, and because you are encouraging people to choose hope, we are here today. Thank you for offering us a new opportunity, that hope is always an option. Our next speaker is Dr. Carolyn. She works a lot with school systems in assessments for children with ADHD and other mental health issues. She speaks to how are our schools doing? How are our kids doing? She sees on the front lines what is going on with teachers and students. Welcome, Dr. Carolyn.
Hello, hello. I'm very excited to be here. Today, I'm talking about COVID and education. The school closures that have happened globally, it's caused severe and prolonged negative effects on our kids' learning and overall well-being. And even when kids did return back to school, schooling's really been this trial and error approach with a lot of uncertainty. There's been a lot of interruptions and even just fear. Oh my goodness, my kiddo has a runny nose. Do I keep them or not? And I know teachers and parents and kids, they're all feeling really overwhelmed and underprepared with this whole pandemic. And parents and kids have even reported a massive decline in learning. Kids themselves are seeing that they're not learning as much, and we're seeing this increase in family distress, especially when parents are burdened with the additional role of being teacher in that time. Now, yes, parents are certainly very important for kids' education, but only as an adjunct to school, right? In which they can offer supplementary opportunities for practicing skills in everyday life, for fueling the love for learning, for learning to love to read, and seeing how we can use reading or writing and math in everyday sort of life. It's not for the actual teaching. And for most parents, they're feeling like they're not able to support their kids' learning anyway. We know that going to school is the best way. It's the best way to raise kids' skills. And even just a short period of time where school is missed has really huge negative consequences for skill growth and development. And COVID, it's created an enormous interruption in our kids' learning. So for example, if we look at early literacy skills, those really important foundational reading skills, they develop way slower when there's any school disruptions, by over 60%. So our young kiddos, our young learners who are learning to read, they're really falling behind. And with older students, we've seen a huge increase in dropout rates. And there's also this unequal interruption because there's a huge disparity between families about how much they can actually support their kids, if they're working full time or not. So yes, there's been a huge surge of online learning platforms, but we don't really have the same teacher monitoring, and there's still a high level of parental involvement needed, which has just created a lot of stress for parents and families. E-learning can definitely be very effective for our older kiddos, but for our younger students, they need that structured environment to actually be able to learn. Kids need to use all of their senses to learn. So they need to have that multisensory experience of a classroom that they just don't get from, being on screens. And a lot of our kiddos who have learning difficulties, they're not being identified, they're not getting the interventions that they need, so they're at great risk too. What I'm most worried about, what's really troubling with all of this interruptions in school, is the tremendous negative effects it has on kids' social and emotional well-being. Social contact is critical for kids' learning. It's critical for their self-regulation. It's critical for their overall development. And we've seen a huge surge of negative feelings, whether it's sadness or anxiety. And oftentimes that will manifest as irritability and aggressive sort of behaviors. And the longer schools were closed, the higher parents saw huge signs of distress in their kids. We see sleep and appetite changes. We see difficulties in handling their emotions. We're even seeing a lot more aggressive and oppositional sort of behavior. And definitely there's been an increase in screen time use. And we know that there's a huge correlation between anxiety and depression and emotional meltdowns, right? And just getting their kids off of their screens. Unfortunately, there's not been a lot done to address our kids' mental health, right? And so their overall sort of psychosocial well-being is definitely at risk. So it's critical that our kids have structure and routine in their lives, as well as many play and learning opportunities as possible. And I see COVID as a great opportunity for reset and connect. Yes, there's been huge negative effects, but it's our connection with our kids. It's going to make all the difference in the world. That's what's going to support their resilience. That's what's going to support their development and self-regulation, emotional control, and overall emotional well-being. So for those of you who are teachers, take a minute just to greet your kids by name with a smile as they come into the classroom, one by one, right? If you're a parent, take that time to connect with your kids at the end of the day when they get home. Get down to their eye levels, smile, give them your full attention. Dinner can wait, right? Show them the love. Show them that you've been thinking about them. And if you have a couple of extra minutes, just pull out a deck of cards and go and play with them. That is going to be a huge protective factor for our kids. And it gives us a moment to be able to connect and love and raise feel-good hormones in our body as well, just to get back to that baseline, because I think we're all just getting so stressed and it's just mounting into huge distress for kids. It's affecting their learning and it's affecting our family functioning as well. So take a minute, love your kids, even if they are oppositional and they have huge explosive behaviors. Underneath all of those behaviors, you have a scared, sad, disconnected child. And so we need to take that moment to reconnect with them. It's going to do them a lot of good. It's going to do us a lot of good. That's kind of what our focus is right now with COVID. So even though there's all of this stress mounting up, it's a great time just to reconnect. Thank you for joining me. Take care.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carolyn, for being here and for your really important work when it comes to our teachers, our students, and our schools. Our next speaker is Andrew. He is from the West Coast, from Ladner, BC. He has been working in his organization called Alongside You, a very unique counseling service that he started so that people could recover, become resilient, and find mental health. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey everybody, great to sort of see you. You can see me, I can't see you, but it's what we got right now. And I'm so glad we could get together across the country. And actually, I'm hopeful that even though we can't be in person, I'm hopeful this means that there's actually more of us together today than maybe there would have been if we were in person. And so Connie asked me to get together with you and talk a bit about what it's been like as a counselor through COVID. So let me tell you what was happening when COVID hit. We were renovating our clinic, we were renovating our house, and we were supposed to be on vacation. And what ended up happening is we didn't have an office to work in, we didn't have a house to live in, and we had nowhere to go. Sound familiar to anybody? So that was my introduction to COVID. And over the last 9 months or so, it's been a roller coaster. And so here's what's happening right now. I am seeing a massive influx of referrals to our clinic. And this is a tension for me, right? Because I often joke with people as a counselor, I kind of wish I didn't have a job, because if I have a job, it means people are having a hard time. And so the increase to me suggests that like we're all having a really hard time with this by now. We're kind of done and ready for it to be over. And we're seeing some behavior like people traveling to places they're not supposed to and running around without masks on, which suggests to me that like, okay, we've kind of hit a frustration point here, which we knew was coming, but it also means we're prolonging this, which isn't good. And so this is the tension, is like people are really struggling. On the other hand, as a clinic owner, like life is a little more predictable now, and I'm not as worried that we're going to have to shut down, which was a worry. And if we shut down, there's a lot of people seeking help that aren't going to get the help they need, which again puts tension. And the other piece that is encouraging to me with all of this is that it suggests that people are going out and seeking help when maybe they weren't seeking help before, which that has been my experience through this as a therapist, as a dad, as a husband, and just as a human being who struggles with mental health, is we really have to be on the ball about doing the things we need to do to keep ourselves healthy. So for me, that's music and sports and connecting with people. And that last piece is so important. It's also one of the hard parts right now, right? We can't connect in the way that we normally do, so we have to get creative. Zoom has become a part of life for most of us at this point, whether it's Zoom or FaceTime or Skype. That is my overall message to you today, is find ways to connect with other people in whatever way you can, even if it's not what you would prefer, even if it's not as good as it would be normally. Any little bit we can get is valuable. And so when you look at the studies on pain, and anytime we struggle with anxiety or depression or grief or loss, we can summarize that as pain. And when we look at the research on pain, what it tells us is there isn't anything on earth that helps with pain more than connection with another safe, secure human being. So this can be our partners, this can be our kids, this can be other family members, this can be our coworkers, our friends. And if we do that, that is the number one thing that's going to reduce the overall pain we're experiencing. The other thing we need to do is make sure we're keeping up the habits that keep us healthy. And so diet and exercise are right at the top of those. Diet is just a healthy, balanced diet. It's not one of those fad diets out there. I mean, if that's your thing, go for it. But just eat healthy, which is hard sometimes when you don't feel motivated to stay inside and eat again. And the exercise, I'm all for exercise and playing sports and running and doing the cardio. That's all great, but sometimes we can't, or we just don't have the motivation. So exercise, when you look at the brain science, 15 minutes of normal person walking is enough to shift your brain chemistry. And I have had to rely on these things myself more than ever. And I'm not perfect at it either. Believe me, I have had to double down on trying to figure out what it is I need to do. And sometimes that's hard. And so here's an exercise that you can try. Take out 2 pieces of paper, and on one of them, stream of consciousness, write down everything you were doing before the pandemic. And then put it aside and take another piece of paper and write down stream of consciousness, everything you're doing right now, and then compare the two and cross off the things that are on both lists. And that should help you highlight the things you're not doing anymore. And if you jump back into those things, it's going to make you feel better. And I'm with you. I'm having to do the same thing. Self-care is huge, and I'm having to learn that over again. And so I hope that's helpful. I wish we were together today, but we can connect this way. And I wish you nothing but the best for you and your family. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you later.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for your important and substantial work. Our next speaker is Vayan. She is from Edmonton. She won Miss Wheelchair Canada. She is an advocate for people with disabilities. She offers hope and courage to everyone she meets. Welcome, Vayan.
Hello everyone, Vayan here. I wonder how many of you have ever had to adapt to finding another way to do something? Probably now more than ever, I would imagine. Another way to communicate, another way to do your shopping, another way just to get through the day and survive another day in lockdown. While I've not experienced a pandemic before, I most definitely have been stuck in my own prison of fear. When I was first paralyzed, I spent the majority of my time and energy focusing on all the things that I couldn't do, fixated on things that I didn't like about myself, being stuck because I couldn't do it like I did before, and I didn't want to. I remembered saying, I don't even want to drive unless I can drive with my feet. I know that sounds funny, but I wanted desperately to be independent, yet I refused to do it differently than I did it before. I had the perspective that doing it differently made me less of a person. This perspective was more paralyzing, you guys, than my disability, more limiting than this chair I'm sitting in. I wanted to drive, but to move past my self-imposed limitations, I had to find another way. That choice to accept driving with hand controls instead of my feet gave me so much more independence. This independence locked some more freedom. That boosted my confidence. This change in perspective enabled me to have courage then to try other things. Now, not only am I driving or jumping out of airplanes, I have since pushed past my fears and insecurities to become an author, a motivational speaker, and starting my own nonprofit organization, and Miss Wheelchair Canada, Miss Kindness World, hello. No, I may not be able to do things the way I did them before. But you know what? There's more than one way. Dare I say, a better way, if you're willing to accept it. I returned home one time from running errands. I pulled into my garage and I got out of my car, rolled onto this ramp that allows me to access the house outside without climbing stairs. Well, the keypad to the side door of the house didn't even work, and so I couldn't get in. So yes, I could have called my neighbor to come, but I had this bright idea that I bet you I could get in that front door. Follow me and I'll show you exactly how I did it that day. I bumped my way up the steps, and stretching as far as I could, I managed to unlock the front door. I know. I wormed my way into the house and unlocked the garage door. I got back into my chair and returned to the garage to find the door open. Ha! Mission accomplished. But you know what, guys? If you remain stuck around obstacles and things that get in your way, you will remain stuck. But if you tell yourself there is always another way, you'll find another way. These stories might not seem like life-changing situations to you, but for me they were. Gaining my independence in these areas after being told I would never be independent was life-changing for me. Looking for different ways to view myself or my situation has indeed given me a courageous perspective. You know, if I didn't change my perspective and find another way to view myself or my circumstances, I would still be home on my couch, consumed with fear, remaining frustrated and stuck. Let me ask you this. Do you have a view about yourself or your circumstance that's obstructing your ability to even want to find another way? I think about all the things that you may have experienced in your life that may be causing you anxiety as you stay focused on all the things you can't control. I want to challenge you to look at the obstacles or these giants in your path. Maybe consider another way to help you see another way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Van, for being here today. Our next speaker is Sarah Robinson. She is from Vancouver Island, BC, and she advises government on Indigenous women's rights. What an important role she plays right now. Sarah, welcome.
Tansei. My name is Sarah Robinson, and I'm a proud citizen of the Fort Nelson First Nation and the Saulteaux First Nation in northern BC's Treaty 8 territory. I'm pleased to join you today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, sometimes also called the City of Vancouver. When I was in my late 20s, I struggled with deep depression and some pretty crippling anxiety. Sometimes I had dark thoughts and even wondered if life was worth living. But then, just a few years later, cancer made me fight for my life. My late dad was a fisherman, and he had this little sign up in his fishing boat, which says, "Don't believe everything you think." But for many years, my thoughts were pretty unhealthy, and I believed many of those thoughts. Our thoughts are powerful and shape our destiny in very real and very physical ways. So in hindsight, my cancer is kind of no surprise, because many nights I wondered if I even wanted to wake up the next day. Those thoughts created intention, and my body responded upon request and produced a life-threatening condition for me. This shows us that the mind is a powerful thing, and what you think you manifest, and what you manifest you become. So it's important to choose your thoughts carefully. As I've learned, if you're struggling, it will pass, and you have the power to make it so by simply believing that you can. In the territories currently called Canada, Indigenous peoples, which includes Inuit, First Nations, and Métis peoples, face unique mental wellness challenges. Colonization sought to make us ashamed for simply being born Indigenous, and remember, thoughts are powerful. Colonial laws like the Indian Act, which is still in effect today, anchored racism directly into Canadian law and set up oppressive systems like residential schools, which left generations of Indigenous children, adults, and peoples suffering physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual harm. These racist practices have created intergenerational impacts, have promoted social and institutional racism, and have led thousands of Indigenous people, just like me, to question my place in life. For many Indigenous people living in rural or remote communities, mental wellness may be particularly challenging right now as the world struggles through the reality of COVID-19. Many small towns or communities lack mental health resources, and it's difficult at the best of times to find support in a crisis. I live in a very small village myself, and although I sought mental wellness support from counselors and doctors while I was struggling with my mental wellness, I ultimately had to build resilience by looking within myself to create the change that I needed to see. As the brilliant author Louise Hay often says, a thought is only a thought, and a thought can be changed. If you can change the thought, you can change the feeling. When I was diagnosed with cancer a couple years ago, I began working to change my thoughts and my lifestyle that impacts those thoughts. It takes work every minute of every day, but I now choose life every day. I listen to guided meditation for free on YouTube, for example. I try to spend 15 minutes or more outside every day. I try to remember to take off my shoes and socks and put my feet directly in the earth. I work less, I relax more, and I have a counselor that I speak to once a month, and these days we connect over Zoom or on the phone. It's taken a lot of work, but I no longer question my place in life because I know that I want to live and that I deserve to be here. I have to turn away from old, negative thought patterns and change my thoughts to prove to the universe that I want to live, because my life now depends on the thoughts that I choose to produce. And I'm here to tell you today that, through my thoughts, I choose life, and if I can do it, so can you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your important work. We stand with you. Our next speaker is Bob Jones from Edmonton, Alberta, who has written a book allowing people who have journeyed through mental health struggles to share their story in his book. He writes about hope. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you for joining the conversation. As a writer, I believe words have the power of life. And I want to share one word, one thing that changes everything. Without this one thing, even the simplest of tasks feel impossible. That one thing is hope. Hope is like light in the darkness. A little while ago, my wife and I were able to check off an item on our bucket list by traveling to Paris, the city of lights, and seeing the Eiffel Tower. Do you know that there are stairways that will take you up to the second story of the Eiffel Tower? And so Jocelyn and I climbed each of the 674 steps. I'll tell you, it was a breathtaking experience in more ways than one. But when we were in the center of that structure, it felt so strong and so secure. That's why the most recognizable structure on planet Earth, the Eiffel Tower, is called the Tower of Hope in the City of Lights. Hope is certain. Real hope is not just wishful thinking. It's not, I hope, I hope, I hope. Real hope is not whistling in the dark or plugging your ears to try to shut out reality. Real hope doesn't pretend that problems don't exist. What real hope does is show you that problems don't last forever, that healing will come, that pain can be overcome. You can experience mental wellness even if you're experiencing mental illness. And that's why conversations like these on days like this with people like you fill me with hope for the future. The awareness around mental health is going up and the stigma around mental illness is going down. And that's because brave people have used their words to tell their stories. When you tell your story, you are seen and heard. As a writer, I have the privilege of meeting some incredibly brave people, and they've changed my life. They've shown me that mental illness is no respecter of persons, that mental illness does not discriminate based on age or gender or socioeconomic status or ethnicity or religion. The stories I write are raw. I have the intent to be honest. You won't find a pretty bow at the end of my stories, but you will find in each story hope, real hope. And that's because the people I meet see faith and medication, prayer and therapy, forgiveness and counseling. And one of the greatest gifts they share with me is the gift of community, the ability to connect with other people. You know, during this pandemic, we've added words to our language. Social distancing. Every time I hear that phrase, I cringe. I think it's better phrased as physical distancing. We need social. We are created for community. And even if that community is created on a Zoom call or a conference call, just like this, it still creates a sense of health. Did you know that the Mental Health Commission of Canada says that when people are facing mental health challenges, they seek out spiritual leaders first and foremost. One of the best resources I've found around mental wellness is called the Sanctuary Course. The Sanctuary Course helps give you words to be able to speak life into others. For instance, there's a big difference between stop crying and why are you crying? Which words do you use with your children? Which words do you use with yourself? One of the greatest aspects of the course is it's Canadian made and its generous donors have made it free. I've used it since last May to facilitate groups, and I've been so impressed by how people have engaged the certainty of hope through this course. So 3 things. What is your Eiffel Tower? What is your certainty? Second, who do you need to see who needs you to be their hope? And thirdly, will you be brave and vulnerable and use your words to speak up and share your story? Not all Canadian heroes wear hockey jerseys, but all heroes use words wisely and speak the language of hope.
Wow, what a year! It's not a surprise to anyone that people across the country have been really struggling hard with their mental health. In Calgary, we've seen stress, anxiety, and social isolation go through the roof. Before COVID, 1 in 5 Canadians struggled with their mental health. These issues are not new, and COVID has shone a laser beam on our collective well-being. In fact, 85% of mental health issues are driven by environmental factors. Things like job loss, financial insecurity, unhealthy relationships, and bullying are life challenges that many of us have experienced. With COVID, we have seen these issues amplified more than ever. To be frank, it feels like life stress on steroids. I've learned a lot about how people are doing through the data collected from the 211 information line. It is a United Way supported program across the country that connects people to community-based services and resources. For example, the volume of calls in Calgary shows us that people are struggling. Contacts are up 73% from 2019 to 2020. The most troubling issue, however, has been the increase in suicide-related contacts, up 33% from 2019. That just breaks my heart. And I can tell you, it can be easy to let the facts overwhelm us, right? But to work to a brighter future, we must be the voice of hope and optimism. We need to look at where we are, what we are facing, and the opportunities to build resiliency and a community where everyone belongs, now more than ever. I have seen the community come together since March to make sure our neighbors' basic needs are met, that families can access technology so they can stay connected, and so newcomers are supported with any language barriers to make certain they can access the services they need. But we must keep asking each other, what more can we do? How do we make sure everyone feels like they are connected and belong? What if we all took responsibility? Every act of kindness matters. We can shovel someone's sidewalk, smile at a neighbor, check in on the senior down the street. We all have a role to play. Through our innovation space, the Social Impact Lab, we investigated ways to improve children and youth mental health. We learned that accessing and navigating programs and services and overcoming stigma was a huge challenge for families. We also heard about the real importance of natural supports that flow from relationships occurring in day-to-day community life, such as family, school, recreation, faith-based activities, and work. So we leaned into the digital disruption and launched Natural Supports YYC. It highlights the potential of every adult to be a natural support for a young person, or really anyone in their life. You know, by building our own skills and knowledge, we can help people develop their own capacity and confidence to take on life's challenges. A natural support is someone that can be there for you at the right place and the right time. And many of us have experienced how powerful it is when someone is in your corner. Think of a time that you had a natural support or were one to someone else. I have seen it in my own life, the power of being a good listener and noticing when something is off. For me personally, my own family has gone through a tough time during COVID as my dear father passed away in our arms in our family home on October 1st. It was very tough with the healthcare protocols and especially hard on my mom as they were best friends for 60 years. As a CEO and leader, you feel pressure to be strong for your team, especially during the local state of emergency. So I was doing my best to keep it together. I shared my story and I was blown away by the support I received. The marketing team sent homemade meals to my mom's house. Board members reached out and gave me their unwavering support. And one even wrote me a heartfelt note sharing his best wishes and gave me reassurances that I would get through this. I'm thankful for all the support, and it gave me courage and strength to carry on, be strong for the team and our community, just what my dad would have wanted. Anyone can be vulnerable at any time. I know we would all agree that it takes courage to reach out, but if we all took a leap of faith to help overcome the stigma, just imagine how many more positive social interactions we would have. It just might mean preventing the point where a mental health struggle develops into a mental illness. I really believe in looking at the silver linings, and 2020 has shown us the power of compassion, connection, and collaboration. Our mayor in Calgary is leading the Community Action on Mental Health and Addiction strategy, and I am proud to be part of the stewardship group. We know we can tackle these complex issues when we work together. My challenge to you is, in your next conversation, make the choice to listen carefully, be present in the moment, look out for one another, and really mean it when you say, "How are you doing today?" I love this next quote by Brené Brown. Connection is the energy that is created between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment. I know great things happen when we come together. We got this.
Today we have heard from Canada. We've heard from people who across all of our nation on different aspects of mental health. At National Hope Movement, we say that mental health is created socially. And there's a reason why we say that. It's because mental health isn't developed through programs and tools. People are not tools and strategies to be applied, but connection to be created. And here at National Hope Movement, our heart for today was to create a place of connection, to hear one another's stories, because stories shift culture. When we can hear someone, see someone, value someone, see past their struggles into who they really are, then they can become. I remember a couple of years ago, I produced a theater show called Rewritten. And in our show, we had our actors stand behind wooden frames. And behind these wooden frames, they shared their stories, stories that created who they were. In this production, the actors told stories of what created them. We heard real stories of racism, of discrimination, of things that hurt them, where they didn't feel seen and valued. But at the end of the show, they chose to lower their frame, putting down their framework in order to see someone else and allowing themselves to be seen. We gave the audience all wooden frames, little popsicle sticks. And I remember at the end, we were compelling the audience to see one another, to no longer look at someone's color of their skin or the mental health issues that they show in their behaviors or in their mindsets, but to really see someone. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget when someone from the audience took their wooden frame and threw it onto the stage. One by one, frames started falling from the audience onto the stage floor, saying, "We will put down our framework in order to see someone else." It was so impacting, and it spoke to me. It spoke to me that mental health issues that we are facing right now in our nation through COVID are not going to come by us standing in our silos alone. It's going to come by rallying together, standing together, and choosing to listen to stories that may disturb us, that may bother us, that may challenge our own framework. But we need to put our frameworks down, come out of our echo chambers, and band together. Because tell me, friends, where is a tsunami of mental health crisis in a band of people who are together? Where does mental illness stand? There, it doesn't. Because the key to mental health, seeing a solution, is not through tools, it's through connection, support, and listening. And that's what we're here to do today. Thank you so much for being with us for our opening ceremonies. We are going to go into a moment where every voice is about to be heard. Your story is about to be told.
Thank you, everyone, for joining our conversation around hope today. We're not ending the conversation. It's just we're going to move over into our incubators and our workshops. If you've pre-registered, you should have links in your email, links to the incubator, which will be happening right after this, and then the workshops, which will be happening right after the incubator. There will be a bit of a 10-minute break between this session and the next session. So get up, go to the bathroom, grab a coffee, do whatever you got to do. Take care of the cat, you know. I know everybody has cats or dogs or something. But before I let you go, I just want to give some recognition to those who made this event possible. If it weren't for the contribution of these individual organizations, this event would not be made possible. So I want to give a shout out to Wellness Innovate, the Calgary Dream Center, Candy Event Consulting, 140 Sports, and Movement with a Message. And also, I want to give a huge shout out to Gerald, who also made this event possible by bringing his cameras and doing the shoot for us. Thank you so much. And know that in the weeks to come, there will be content. This content will be available on our website. So click the link below, and in a few weeks, the same content that you heard and saw today will be available on our website. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day, and let's keep the conversation going.